Hello and welcome to Podcast Review 8. This is the Just Fly Performance Podcast, episode 28, with Corey Peacock, who is a MMA coach who trains fighters in the UFC, Bellator. He's got some high-level top guys in America. So it's the first kind of Just Fly podcast where they didn't talk about track. They talked about kind of something completely random. I've only got 5 points down, but it was pretty interesting. They had a lot of research done on sleep, and their guys were more recovered when they had, even if they had less sleep length, when they had consistency of rest. So if they were to go to bed at the same time every night, and if they were to have naps, for example, at the same, or even downtime at the same time as every day, they had better recovery metrics than people who would sleep longer, but in random times. They might go to bed at 9 p.m. One day, and then maybe, like I say, like 7 a.m. on another day if they're kind of shift workers, so doing the night shift, on the night shift. So that's interesting, and it's also interesting for when people... I guess it's interesting for when people complain about not being able to get to sleep as well, is that if you just... I think a lot of the issues with people not sleeping now is they kind of give up straight away. I know I've done this. Is they can't sleep and they just give up. Whereas the few times when I've been... I say the few times. The times nearly every week where I stay up all night and don't sleep... I just try, I know it's happening, I'm there wide awake. I know it's happening. I know it's going to be awake all night. And when I say all night, I mean literally, I do not sleep at all. I'll just try and rest as much as I can, or read, or even do some stretching, or I basically just try not to worry about it and just try and chill out as much as I can. So I at least get rest, rather than sleep. And then I'm fine. I hit the 172 clean after zero. I'll have to check my sleep diary, but after I think that was a 0 hour sleep night. But yeah, you just try and be consistent with the rest time. So even though I didn't fall asleep, I was still technically resting that whole time. A lot of his guys at the top level, now this might not happen at a lower level, but they don't have a lot of time notice for fights. So they basically are told by their sponsors maybe, or by the promoters, you've got to fight in 4 weeks. So that's why they do conjugate style periodization. So they try and concurrently kind of train multiple different physical qualities in conjugate. So they'll do maybe a strength day or a power day, and then the next day do an aerobic day, a speed day. They'll mix it all in. And I guess that's understandable in terms of the sport itself as well. The demands of the sport are that you have to have all those physical qualities. And then it's a coordination-driven sport, so they felt like they didn't need to train the Olympic lifts. They didn't need to train the Olympic lifts because it's such a coordination-heavy sport that why train something that's even more coordination heavy when you could just do the sport itself? And that was actually probably the best rationale I've ever heard for someone not using weightlifting. And that makes a lot of sense to me, is that you don't need to... It's so coordination heavy, Olympic weightlifting, as is MMA, that you don't... Maybe marring the two is actually not beneficial at all. They talked about, does training even need to be perfect? And I absolutely agree, no, it does not. I think a lot of people complain way too much that something in the training isn't absolutely right. So I think the example he was using was that, someone didn't get, they only got 7 hours sleep instead of 8, or they only got even like 4 off like 3 hours sleep, and they were just like, I need to not train. And then he was just like, fucking get over it, essentially. And I do kind of agree. I do agree. At the lower level, I agree. I actually don't agree at the higher level. I think, obviously, I guess know what the limit is, or not even that, but you can still train. Just do something different. Just don't max out that day. If you've got a max snatch or max squat on that day planned, then you literally don't sleep at all. Then just don't do it. Just do it the day after. It's absolutely fine. But people will complain, then they'll go into the session with no sleep and then not eating and whatnot, and they'll expect to hit a PB, and it's like, it's unlucky. It's not going to happen. So, training doesn't need to be perfect, but you need to make it as, I guess it doesn't have to be perfect, but you need to make it as perfect as possible. And that means that if you don't sleep, as the example, there's no reason why you can't go in and do something. Even if it's do your warm-up and then go, you've still done something. I think psychologically you'd be in a much better place than if you just sacked off the session. I think you'd be in a much... physically it might do you good as well. I know the times when I've been feeling rough and I haven't trained, which is not very often, I've absolutely regretted it almost immediately and then just gone back in later in the evening to train anyway, so... or got up early next morning. So that was a very interesting point. It also doesn't need to be perfect in the sense of perfect sets and reps. I think that changes a little bit more for a sport like weightlifting and powerlifting, where it's purely kind of weights based. I think they were actually talking about speed ladders, and they were talking about, obviously speed ladders have been absolutely discredited in terms of building fast feet or whatever, or building kind of speed, but they were saying like, for, obviously it's sport dependent, but for the MMA guys, like, why would you not use them? Like, it's a fantastic warm-up tool. You can make it into kind of games, you can make it into competition, and you doing like these little fast feet drills, yeah, alright, fair enough, if you're an Olympic sprinter, maybe don't, but you doing these fast feet drills in a ladder is absolutely not going to change the neural pattern of how to do a kick or how to do an uppercut or whatever. And that neuroses is from a strength coach's own personality, and he's using that to someone who thinks that way is obviously neurotic, like myself, and is putting that kind of insecurity onto the, not insecurity, if that's definitely the wrong word, is putting that insecurity. Whew, it's been a long day, very long day. They're putting that kind of fear that their movement pattern's going to change and they're moving on to something else, or they're saying that, as soon as you do this once, all your ability to stand up tall when you sprint is going to be gone. And obviously that's absurd. What they were saying was that if it has a benefit, it has a benefit, essentially. Now, if the benefit isn't what the well-known benefit is, then fair enough, it doesn't matter. And then they were doing, obviously for weight class sports, they were talking about, now this is very, very important in MMA and all weight class sports, trying to build strength and power without hypertrophy. Now this could be a bit of a conundrum, actually, but they took long rests in between sets, they did really low volume, and they were even talking about cutting out the eccentrics on some movements where they didn't deem them necessary, just so there's less time and attention, just so muscle damage is minimized, so that hypertrophy, building muscle doesn't happen as much, so they can not grow out of their weight class. So that was it. That was just Fly Performance Podcast episode 28 with Corey Peacock, and have a wonderful, wonderful